world on that first Good Friday. We'll be using the Gospel of Matthew tonight as our guide for the final hours, experiences, and interactions in the life of Jesus. We will sing about the cross, and when we leave in a few moments, Jesus will be dead and buried in a borrowed tomb. We know the rest of the story because we live on this side of the first Easter. But let's take a trip through time tonight and attempt to place our imaginations, our hearts, and our minds in that time and in that place, watching as the story unfolds before us. As we begin, let's first return to last night. Jesus has gathered with his disciples for a Passover meal. Judas has already agreed to betray Jesus. They have secured the location for their meal, and Judas and Jesus have just had a difficult yet truthful interaction about the looming betrayal. Jesus then leads them through an unusual group interaction.
Hi, good evening. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Sorry, just one moment. So before I actually begin discussing communion, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of a backstory that I think might actually be really helpful in kind of understanding the aspects of this. Particularly, we have to go back about 1,400 years before Christ. You see, during that time, the Israelites had been enslaved for about 200 years. And God had decided that it was finally time for them to get out of that slavery. So he decided to tell Moses to go and tell Pharaoh that he needed to release them from their bondage. And when Moses got there, the Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he wouldn't do it. So God sent 10 plagues. Now, particularly, I just want to talk about the last plague, though, which was the plague where the firstborn was going to be killed. So in order to avoid this, the Israelites were asked to do one act of faith. They were asked to take a lamb, 1-year-old male, and they were asked to take it in their home for 2 weeks, love it, take care of it, feed it, nurture it, and then slaughter it. Put its blood on the doorframe, and then eat it with their clothes fully on, like they were going to leave at any moment. And so that became the first Passover. And I say that just to set the scene for where Jesus is. Jesus is now in Jerusalem, and he is going to celebrate Passover. And that's the dinner they're having. They're most likely going to be eating lamb with unleavened bread. And during this time, he decides to show his real nature. He is the unblemished lamb. He is the one that they took in. They took care of him. They loved him. And then he was slaughtered. But before that, they have to understand that his blood is also going to be the blood that they put on the door frame, so to speak, except for this time it's not a door frame, it's a cross. And the blood that's put on that cross is going to be the eternal Passover, the one that finally ends the need to even practice Passover to begin with. So at that time, this would have been a huge revelation for them, and one I think we really just need to consider the importance of as we partake in our time here together. So now I'm going to be reading scripture for all who have given their life to Christ and wish to partake with me. Please do. If not, that's fine. Just abstain. There's no harm in that either. It's up to you. So please join me as I read the Word of God and we partake in the elements. While they were eating, Jesus took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." So please join me as we eat. Then he took a cup, and he gave them sorry. And he gave it to the disciples and said, giving thanks, and then gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, for that which is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness. Drink of the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Please drink with me. When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to the disciples, and he found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men watch with me for an hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping? Are you still resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend. Put your sword back in its place." The men stepped forward, seized Jesus, arrested him, and with that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus saw this coming and immediately said, "Stop. Put your sword back in its place. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place, that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled.
King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn-crowned brow, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even thy cup of grief to share. Thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary.
Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." "You have said so," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?"
His glory. exchanging someday for a crown.
Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath, "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." And immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went away and wept bitterly.
What would you do for a king if he won all the battles he went out to fight and returned as a hero on a starlit night to a cheering crowd? Would it make you proud? What would you do for a king if he kept every promise that he'd ever made? Would you get out the ticker tape and lead a parade, a society ball? Would you care at all? Kings always seem to me as such grand, imposing men, so full of stature, full of power, so much authority in every word they say. I never thought I was quite the type, but I'd still love to meet one someday. What would you do for a king? If he came to your door, would you ask him in? Would you tell him how much you admired him? Do you think you'd dare? Would you be too scared? Most kings don't seem to know much about the common man, too far removed and set apart. I cheer with thousands, we blend into a roar. Another face in an endless crowd. Is that all I really am? Just one more. So what would you do for a king if he saw you fishing out by the sea and he walked up to you and said, "Follow me, it's time you know"? Do you think you'd go? And what would you do for a king if he took off his crown and agreed to die? And as you tried to understand it, he looked you in the eye and said, "This is for you." Well, what would you do?
Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. Now, it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered him, "Crucify him!" "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Oh Lord, you serve
Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry his cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you're the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him." He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and ordered it to be offered to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes and saves him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Jesus is dead and buried. As we prepare to leave tonight, we're going to sing one final song. And then I just encourage you to leave reflecting upon the incredible price that was paid for your eternal salvation. Take a moment, don't miss this opportunity to allow your thankfulness to be watered and grow in your life, but also to consider in your own life if there are any unconfessed sins that you need to crucify today. I invite you to stand as we sing this final song. When we're finished singing, you're dismissed.